All right, so today we're going to be on page 311, and we're working with right triangles, congruence. And before we get these theorems in your notes, in a right triangle, you've got one 90-degree angle, which makes it a right triangle. The two sides that form that angle are called the legs. The side opposite the 90-degree angle is the hypotenuse. And then the other two angles, I label this ABC. Angle A and angle B are referred to as the acute angles. And angle A plus angle B in a right triangle is always equal to 90 degrees. So all of these theorems are going to refer to a leg or a hypotenuse or an acute angle. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of what the theorem is talking about when they're talking about those different items. So theorem 5.6 is called leg-leg congruence. And you want to get that in your notes. Leg-leg. If the legs of one right triangle are congruent to the corresponding legs of another right triangle, then the triangles are congruent. All right, the legs of one congruent to the legs of another. So if you've got a right triangle, and a second right triangle, and then AB is congruent to NM and NO is congruent to BC. That's all the information that you need to determine that the triangles are congruent. All right, you got two legs of one right triangle congruent to two legs of another right triangle. I mean, it's also an example of side angle side congruence, but since it's a right triangle, they're using this leg congruence theorem. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle MNO. Everybody all right with that? Leg congruence in right triangles. Two legs of one congruent to two legs of another, then the triangles are congruent. Theorem 5.7, hypotenuse angle congruence. HA. If the hypotenuse and an acute angle of one right triangle is congruent to the hypotenuse and acute angle of another right triangle, then the triangles are congruent. And congruent. Hypotenuse and an angle. Hypotenuse and an acute angle. So hypotenuse and an acute angle. Triangle DOG and triangle CAT. Get it? Dog, cat? Oh, that's funny. Hypotenuse and an acute angle. So here's the hypotenuse. Here's an acute angle. Congruent to hypotenuse and an acute angle. Then the triangles are congruent. And really, it's the same as angle side congruence. Okay, angle side congruent to angle side. But we're going to call it hypotenuse angle. So triangle, let's go with ODG, is congruent to triangle. If we started with O, what do we start the second one with? A, good. And then we went to the other acute angle, so we're going to go ACT. Any questions there? Move on down the page to theorem 5.8, leg angle congruence. And that one's going to be LA. And this theorem states if one leg in an acute angle and an acute angle of a right triangle is congruent to one leg and an acute angle of another right triangle, then guess what?
Triangles are congruent.
The triangles are congruent. One leg and an acute angle. So a leg and an acute angle congruent to a leg and acute angle. Very similar to angle side angle, isn't it? So we got triangle ZYX congruent to triangle. First letter in the second description. L, right? And then what? L, M, and N. And one more theorem down there on the bottom of page 311. Hypotenuse leg congruence. You should be able to write that theorem just by the name of it. Hypotenuse leg. They'll refer to it in the book as HL. What do you think needs to be congruent now?
A leg and a hypotenuse.
Great answer. Hypotenuse and leg. So if the hypotenuse and leg of one right triangle is congruent to the hypotenuse and leg of another right triangle then I would say the triangles are congruent. hypotenuse, and a leg. All right, so if you had to prove these triangles congruent using hypotenuse, leg congruence, what side in the triangle on the left has to be congruent to what side triangle on the right? Anybody? You're going to use hypotenuse, leg. So wouldn't a hypotenuse have to be congruent to hypotenuse? AC would have to be congruent to XZ or ZX. Hypotenuse, leg. What else has to be congruent? A leg. Does it matter which one? No. So let's go BC would have to be congruent to what? XY. Very good. So you'll have some questions today where you have to choose which sides or acute angles would need to be congruent in order to use each of these theorems. So the congruent statement here would be, again, BAC is congruent to triangle Y ZX. And if you're asked for, or you're asked to give a reason, well, they're congruent by hypotenuse leg theorem. All right, so any questions about those theorems? They are very self-explanatory. All right, so your practice for today is going to be on, it's going to start on page 313. Problems 4 through 10. You've got 10 Alex topics again this week. And some of you guys just don't do the electronic assignments. If you don't know where to find them, let me know or ask me and I'll show you where to find them. But by week 13, you should really know where to find your electronic assignments. Some of your grades are getting destroyed because you just keep piling up zeros every week because you're not doing your practice problems and then submitting your answers through Focus. So let's try to do a little better job of that this week.